Okay. The International Day of Peace is today, September 21st, 2023. What is the International Day of Peace? Well, each year, the International Day of Peace, IDP, is observed around the world on September 21st, and the United Nations General Assembly has declared this as a day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace. The date initially chosen was the regular opening day of the annual sessions of the General Assembly, the third Tuesday of September. Ways to observe. Obviously, it is past 12 p.m. now, but we shared about this on our social media. One of the ways to observe the International Day of Peace is through the peace wave. And so this is at 12 noon in all time zones, meaning that for everybody, it wouldn't be at the same time. The idea is a wave. And Hawaii is actually one of the last participants in the wave. So super cool moment to be a part of. And the peace wave began on the first observation of the International Day of Peace, September 21st, 1982, and has continued to spread throughout the world in multiple ways. And the peace wave is for humanity to use as a unitive act of peace on Peace Day and every day. So in 2001, the United Nations General Assembly unanimously voted to officially designate the day as a period of nonviolence and ceasefire, with September 21st officially being set as the date every year. Each year, the United Nations also observes an associated theme. So in 2018, the theme was the right to peace, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the age of 70. In 2019, it was Climate Action for Peace. 2020 was Shaping Peace Together. 2021 was Recovering Better for an Equitable and Sustainable World, obviously in reference to the COVID-19 pandemic. And 2022 was End Racism and Build Peace. And that leaves us to 2023, which we all know is to bring attention to the United Nations Global Sustainable Development Goals, specifically to make action plans and figure out what we can do about them. And which goal 5 is gender equality and women's empowerment, which is what we're focused on today. What are the goals within the goals? So they call these the targets. So you can see how these would apply globally and to your own backyard and within your community. So adopt and strengthen policies and enforceable legislation for gender equality, enabling information and communication technology to promote the empowerment of women, ensure full participation in leadership and decision making, end discrimination against women and girls, eliminate forced marriages and genital mutilation, universal access to reproductive health and rights, a really important one that pretty much everyone globally is facing right now, end all violence against and exploitation of women and girls, value unpaid care and promote shared domestic responsibilities, as well as equal rights to economic resources, property ownership, and financial services. So that's a lot, right? So you may be thinking, well, what are ways that I can actually talk about these and be proactive with these in my own community? So here are ways that all of us can leave here today knowing that we can promote gender equality and women's empowerment. So please discuss, promote, and advocate for gender equality with your family members and your children. Support women-owned businesses. Shop from companies and businesses that promote gender equality. Keep in mind that gender is not the same as biological sex. Speak out against gender-based violence. Support reproductive freedom. Advocate for equity and challenge gender stereotypes. Most importantly, everyone here, just use your voice. Be that advocate for folks who may need it you never know when you sort of speaking out can be a catalyst for change. So you have more power than you think. And today we're going to learn all about the amazing guests that have come here to talk about gender equality and observe the International Day of Peace with us. So I'm so grateful, and I hope that you leave feeling inspired. So thanks everyone for being here. So without further ado, ASUH President Lutlani Chung Kuehu. Thank you, Lutlani.
Hello, my Kako. Please bear with me. I'm a little congested, so if I die, just keep going. If you know the Oli, please join me. If you don't, you're still gonna join me anyways. So, first I would like to, if you can, to please Ku'iluna to stand up. I also have Dominic on the side here with me, who is our senator with ASUH. So, yeah. So once we get ready, I'll go ahead and start the Oli. Put this back here. Do you know anything? That is okay. Everyone ready? E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e. Mama wana. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Lutlani. Really appreciate that. Very important part of today's presentation. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to my co-moderator, Sarita Washington.
Aloha, my kako. Really excited to begin this discussion today of what we can all do and what resources are in our communities. And so I'm going to start off our discussion today with Ari. So Ari, Alex gave us a wonderful introduction in terms of setting some context for what today is about. And so I'd like to know if you could share with us a little bit more about the history of the Sustainable Development Goals for this International Day of Peace. Ari?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much, and happy International Day of Peace. Really humbled to be here and excited to learn from all of you. I'm wearing my pink today in honor of Maui, actually, and we hosted on KTUH in our University of Hawaii United Nations Association chapter our 4th annual Ring Your Bell for Peace Day this morning, where we had interfaith and international leaders from all over the world share about their vision for the future of peace, and so it's really special to continue this celebration and commemoration, talking about really the focus of gender equality, which is so critical. A little bit about my background is that I've been a civil society representative to the United Nations, and particularly in this context, have served on the UN Women Interagency Working Group for Youth and Gender Equality. And I also, at the University of Hawaii's Matsunaga Institute for Peace, I teach human rights. Additionally, I also help teach with astrobiology and space exploration. And my PhD right now is in future studies, where I'm researching the future of humanity throughout the framework of sustainable development becoming multiplanetary. And that's really exciting to think about as we go back to the moon and have the first woman going to the moon this time. And so looking at the system of sustainable development, this is really exciting because it's the first time in human history that all of the governments of the world have agreed to something. And some big things, really all the things you can imagine. There are 17 goals, 169 indicators, and it's framed around ending poverty, healthcare, education, addressing all of our climate and environmental issues, peace, justice, strong institutions. And really at the core of it, if you ask any diplomat, anyone within the UN system, SDG 5 is really the most important thing. We can't achieve any of these goals without gender equality. And so it's really important that we look at that, and also within the framework of previous international treaties like CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which notably the United States is one of the only countries in the world that has not ratified this international treaty. So it's important that we look at the foundation for these goals, and also are aspirational towards what we want to see for 2030, and really having gender parity in all forms of leadership, not just eliminating the discrimination, but really seeing the equality and the elevation of all of the issues, not just women's rights, but also, as David mentions, SOGI issues, sexual orientation and gender identity, and really all of our human rights challenges that we face. So I'll leave it there because I'm so excited to hear from these wonderful women panelists. And I just again want to express my appreciation and gratitude. You know, I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I really look to the leadership of these wonderful women paving the way for achieving and creating the world that we want to see. So thank you so much.
Mahalo for sharing that. And, you know, one of the things that stands out in terms of what you just said is women's rights are human rights. They're everyone's rights. And there's this intersectionality between this goal and the other goals, sustainable development goals. And so I'm just wondering, before we move on, it's been 8 years since we established these goals, right? So how far do you think we've come? And what do you think about the future of these sustainable development goals, especially as it relates to, you know, gender equality and women's ability to, you know, gain power?
Yeah, it's pretty bad right now, to be honest. The data is for all the sustainable development goals. I think we're 18% of the indicators are on track. And for SDG 5, only 15% of those indicators are on track. So we have a long and far way to go, and it's particularly alarming to see the rollback of these human rights, even and especially in our own country. So I think that we'll hopefully see a powerful surge and this fourth quarter push to really do that. But yeah, we are not doing well as far as reaching those goals at the moment.
Thank you for sharing that. And to continue our discussion, I'm going to pass it on over to Alex, so that we can talk a little bit more about, you know, mental health and how these kinds of things impact that. Alex?
Yes, thank you, Sarita, and thank you so much, Ari. Ari is actually an instructor of the human rights course that I'm currently taking, so I'm learning a lot about these sustainable development goals, especially, you know, as you said, how we really can't achieve any of them without, you know, focusing on gender equality, which is one of the reasons we're all here today. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that mention of mental health, Sarita, because I think that's at the core of so much that could, you know, begin to be solved, or at least the conversations could be started. So I'm really grateful to have our next guest, Carissa Yoshida from the Pono Roots Counseling Center. Lexer is going to put her info into the chat, her bio into the chat. But Carissa, thanks so much for being here. And in general, just from kind of what you've heard so far and from your expertise, how important is the connection with your own mental health in regards to gender equality and women's empowerment?
Honestly, it encompasses a lot when we think about just mental health. I mean, if you think about the opposite of what equality is or what empowerment is, it's, inequality, it's disempowerment, right? So much of what we just see in a clinical setting or even just in a therapy session, right? It has these systemic links to safety and security. And I kind of view safety and security, you can view it as in a micro level. So the individual, the immediate family, to even the macro level. This is where we're talking about these community sustainable goals, right? So it really requires everyone to have equal access. It really requires everyone to have, a sense of just dignified living, right? Standards of living. And so much of our empowerment is also based on how safe do I feel in my own family, right? How safe do I feel in my workplace? How secure am I in raising my children? Can I see or envision this security for my children, my grandchildren? So much of it, just kind of flows between the individual health level, and we can really see this, pressure from the top down policy level of rollbacks on protection for women's rights, queer rights. I mean, so much of it impacts our mental health and how we either show up or participate in our partnerships, to even parenting, to how do I, as an individual, right, deal with my own stressors in that mental health space.
I really appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that, especially like you said, just, dealing with being in relationships, being in families, being parents, like how do we, make sure we focus on mental health because it is so important. Specifically, with your work, I know you're dealing with a multitude of situations, be it with counseling. And what are some of the statistics on what women and queer people face, specifically in Hawaii, in regards to domestic violence and other adversities?
Sure. And can be a simple Google search for anyone who also wants to pull up statistics in Hawaii. But it is about 1 in 3 women experience IPV, 1 in 4 men experience IPV. And just with the queer community alone, it was the Aloha study that was published in 2020. With their participants identified at least 68.8% of queer folks have experienced intimate partner violence in their own intimate relationships. So and I know that just on a national policy level, we are also seeing that domestic violence, intimate partner violence, it is a public health concern. Because again, so much of mental health, right? It has to be this lock and step for, is my mental health, is it being taken care of at home? Because you can't have it being only taken care of at work. You can't have it without some type of security and connection within your family or your partnership. So we really do see that these statistics have been ever present with fluctuations, but I think it very much is, always going back to this equality piece, this empowerment piece.
Wonderful. I really appreciate you mentioning that Aloha study. I'll be sure to put that in the chat as well so folks can look into that and just kind of, learn about just the issues and kind of, injustices that are being faced on a regular day here in Hawaii in general and all, globally. So it's with statistics, you really get to see the facts and you get to see some of the data and you get to kind of start having these conversations about what you can do to actually make change. And I think that's one of the most important parts. So in that regard, I'll pass the mic over to my co-host Sarita, who's going to ask some questions more about some different injustices and issues that are being faced in Hawaii today. So thank you so much, Carissa.
Yeah, it was really important that, Carissa had the opportunity to share some of the statistics related to IPV, intimate partner violence. And so I'd like to just ask Radhika to come to the stage. You work with Hawaii Women's Fund, and you can see her bio in the chat as well. I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more, especially as we think about here in Hawaii. What are some of the issues, injustices, and inequalities that we're finding that women face here?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Just kind of, I'll dovetail off of what Carissa said with some statistics, but some on a small bright note, like the rest of the nation, there are more women graduating college in Hawaii. The gender pay gap is narrowing. There are more women in the workforce in higher wage jobs. So these are some positives, obviously, but the question is, at what rate are we going, and is it enough, right? So going off of the gender wage gap, right? We know in Hawaii that, and I'm reading these statistics off of the Status of Women report that the Women's Fund did, and it was in 2017, so slightly, we're a few years off here, but still relevant. Women earn 81 cents to the a man's dollar in Hawaii. So got that gap there, right? Hawaii, interestingly, is one of only 7 states in the country where men outnumber women. A large one is Hawaii. The state has the 6th highest rate of poverty. And so we know that's going to affect women disproportionately. So 10% of women are living in poverty in Hawaii, and that's, relative, right? With the high cost of living here, we know that 10% probably not indicative. But 37% of those women, Pacific Islanders, women are living in poverty. So that number jumps, right? And then 32% of kids here live with a single parent household. More than likely, that's going to be a mom. So with all these statistics, what does that actually mean in the context of Hawaii, right? So like I said, there's strides being made, but these statistics don't exist. So with the Women's Fund, I'll just combine this here. What we're trying to do here, we're a grant-making organization. So you're gonna ask, what does a grant-making organization really do? We kind of bridge the gap between folks who are saying, well, I read all these statistics, what can I do? So we fund super community-based organizations. So these are organizations that are on the ground, community-based, trying to alleviate some of these statistics that I already mentioned, right? So I'll just talk quickly, as I already mentioned, Maui. With what happened in Maui, the tragedy, women, obviously, everyone is being affected. Women and children are being you know what I'm trying to say here. They're being affected at a different rate. And so we actually were able to fund hyper-local organizations that are getting not just diapers and supplies and things to moms, pregnant women, babies, but getting prenatal health care, for example. We heard from our partners on the ground that women are really not being able to get access to the care that they need. They're not getting, while supplies are flooding in, they're not getting access to those supplies. How do they get to those supplies? So we're funding these hyper-local organizations that are working to kind of bridge that gap there and get women the supplies and the things that they need, services that they need. So Women's Fund, really what we're trying to do is bridge the gap, get really local, and work with organizations that are on the ground and trying to support women who are not necessarily being seen by the larger kind of nonprofits and funds that are in the state.
So you talked about this idea of getting really local, which I think is very important, because oftentimes when you're trying to access funds, there's all of this bureaucracy and paperwork and things that just become barriers to folks who really need the services. Can you talk a little bit more about, some of the specific services you've funded or some of the events that you've hosted, and just kind of how folks have been able to access those things?
Yeah, so we the plus point of being a grant making organization is that we have community orgs reach out to us directly. So when I say community organizations, I'll give you an example of an organization on the Big Island called Going Home Hawaii. So what they do is they work with folks who are formerly incarcerated, re-entering society, and don't have access to a lot of the things that we do, and we live in society continuously, right? Women are also affected at a different rate than men when they're re-entering society. So we fund an organization like that who is based in Hilo, who they literally have team members that go out, talk to folks on the street, talk to folks coming out of these prisons and are re-entering society, and then literally ask them, what do you need, right? What services do you need? Let us help you set up housing, let us help you set up healthcare, which is a huge thing, right? You don't have healthcare when you're in prison, for example, and so on. So the idea is to fund organizations like that who really just get down to communities and talk to folks. Yeah, I can share it with you. It's called Going Home Hawaii. And the executive director there is Les Estrella. So he's awesome. But that gives you just kind of an idea of one of the organizations. There are many more, you know, we work with, speaking of Maui, there's an organization there who is, and I can't remember the name of them right now specifically, but it's literally one woman who started her own 501c3 and asked for funding for diapers, for formula, for so on, and for money for gas to help her get those supplies to women in communities affected. So those are just a couple of examples.
Mahalo for sharing those. And as we move on, if you can think of a repository or resource where some of our participants could access some of these organizations, if you wouldn't mind just sharing it in the chat. We really appreciate, this conversation and what you folks are doing. So I'm really excited to pass it back off to Alex so that we can continue the discussion.
Thank you, Sarita, and thank you so much, Radhika. Really excellent to hear about all the different efforts and sort of community level engagements that you folks are a part of. And again, it's super inspiring. So I'm hoping that attendees of the audience today are just getting ideas on how they can also contribute to their various communities as well. And speaking of community driven engagement, our next guest is definitely, I would say, a community leader. She used to have women's empowerment groups in Honolulu. So I'm super excited to introduce Abby Angelis. She is a women's empowerment and health coach. And so thank you so much for being here, Abby. Her bio will be put in the chat. There it is right there. And Abby, again, thanks for being here. And my first question to you is, why do you think women's empowerment is important on a community level?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I have already learned so much from everyone that has shared so far. I think that women's empowerment and gender equality is so important in where we are today in age, but in the time that we're living today. So I think having this conversation is important. So before I answer that really quick, I just want to acknowledge just everyone's knowledge and in your own topic specific, and I think it's important to continue to share this, continue to have this conversation. I know in the presentation that you shared, Alex, you talked about some of the things that we can do individually is by talking about it, by having these conversations, whether it's through social media, whether it's through our friendships, our friend groups or church or immediate just groups. I think it's important to continue this conversation. So thank you. So I believe that women's empowerment on a community level can be so impactful because we know the power of just one single person. right? And with the work that I do as a life coach, I work one-on-one with women, and I know the confidence that one woman can gain over, you know, a period of just focusing on themselves, of working within themselves, you know, emotionally, with their emotional health, their physical health, their mental health as well. And once one woman can gain that empowerment, that believe in themselves, that that trust in themselves, they then create this ripple effect in their own lives, right? Within their children, their marriage, their friend group, at work, in their own community, in their church, in their school. So imagine the power of one woman. And now, as these women feel more empowered, and as they're coming together, they now begin to create this bigger ripple effect. And I think sometimes when we think of this community aspect, sometimes it can be like too much, right? Like, it's how can I do something that big? How can I be, you know, a voice of change for this bigger issue? And so bring it down to this micro level of just yourself, right? When you begin to work on yourself, when you begin to, whether, you know, you call it healing, you call it self-development, you call it, you know, whatever you want to call it, but when you really begin to do this work and feel empowered, and really and empowered can be in different areas of your life, right? Your health, right? Like taking full responsibility of your health, right? Taking full responsibility of even your, and when I say that is that, you know, maybe the doctor isn't giving me the answers that I want, or maybe I'm not getting what I need from this resource. What else can I do? Right? So it's really feeling empowered in your life and knowing that you do have so much power within yourself. And so once these women can come together and they can, you know, form this community, whether it is going out and looking for it, or whether it is asking for that support, for that guidance, you will begin to find your tribe. And that's what I did with this women's empowerment group that I found here in Honolulu. Is I was looking for my tribe, and I wasn't finding what I wanted. I was no longer in my phase of just being friends with just anyone anymore. Like, I was in this place in my life where I needed more support. I needed that that group of women who will encourage me, who will support me, who will uplift me. And I didn't find that, and so I created that. And so maybe that's for you as well. Maybe you go out and create that. Maybe you are a pioneer in your own neighborhood, in your own community, and you start that as well. And so there's so much power when we come together.
Oh, I think that's so wonderful. And I think that's really great that, you know, you kind of saw what, yeah, exactly, being proactive. You saw what, you know, needed to happen, and you really took the initiative to sort of do that. And that's how you sort of made that positive impact on your community. So you speak just of various impacts that folks can make. Let me just ask you, I mean, do you have ideas on that people can take away, maybe listening or watching today, just one thing they can do for themselves to make a positive impact on gender equality, or just the conversation of women's empowerment and the conversation of building women up and building each other up?
Yes, I think just having this conversation, just in general, educating yourself, and as well being self-aware. I think as leaders, those who have spoken so far, who are here today, is I believe that we have a responsibility, and something that I think we all have access to is internet, is a computer, it's social media as well, and we can use that as a tool. We can be the light to, you know, to begin to have these conversations, to spread this knowledge, to advocate for these issues that we know are so important. And so, you know, rather than feed into maybe some negativity that we see in the media, be that light, start that conversation, and continue to educate yourself, continue to ask questions. If you don't know, ask questions, rather than assume, rather than judge, rather than criticize. It really becomes like so much of self-awareness as well. So I think that's a simple thing that we can all begin to do.
I really appreciate that. It sounds like, in a way, it's just we can just care more. We can actually just pay more attention to the communities around us, pay attention to ourselves, like you said, our health, our mental health. It's all just so important for us to actually take the time to care and sort of maybe erase this narrative that we don't deserve care, because we all really do deserve it. I think that's so important. So I really appreciate you talking about that positive impact. And I know you've made a positive impact on so many folks' lives, as all of these awesome presenters have so far today. I wanted to ask the audience if they have any questions for any of these presenters. Please leave them in the chat and we will definitely get to those. I'm going to pass the mic over to my co-moderator, Sarita, and she's going to talk about some questions that we have already submitted, and we'll just kind of we'll keep the conversation going.
For sure. One of the things that we opened up, and this would be to any of the panelists who feel like you can kind of speak to this, we started to talk about the fact that these goals were developed back in 2015. And here we are in 2023, and we're still talking about, I was reading the report, one of the major areas of failure is that we still haven't addressed child brides, right? Young women and girls getting married below the age of 18, and that's a big issue. So with so many large issues happening around the world with regard to women and equality, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. Like you don't know where to start, right? So could each one of our panelists just give me one thing that anyone in this room could do today to just start?
Sure. I think for me, I'm also representing the United Nations Association, USA, of the University of Hawaii chapter and Hawaii chapter. And I would recommend everyone listening to get involved in that and be able to really advocate for gender equality, as well as all the sustainable development goals, locally, but also nationally and internationally. And there are two big conferences every year: the Global Engagement Summit, which happens usually around February at the UN headquarters in New York, as well as the Leadership Summit in DC, where you have an opportunity to meet with members of Congress to urge them to support these international agendas for human rights as well. So I think becoming a member of UNA USA and joining that global coalition for gender equality would be my recommendation.
Before we move on to the next recommendation, I do have a follow-up to you, Ari, because I'm going to challenge you a little bit. A lot of what you just said is very scholarly and academic and can be intimidating for some folks. Some folks might say, who am I to show up to DC and say, you need to do better? But really, that's what we should be doing, right? So how do you overcome that kind of like, who am I to even bring this up, to engage in these kinds of important conversations? Because you just listed a whole bunch of organizations, even one here in Hawaii. And how do we then knock on the door and say, hey, I'd like to be part of this discussion?
Yeah, I think that the key is focusing on what each individual is passionate about, whether it is mental health or nonprofit empowerment or maternal health, or it's finding your passion, your skill, and tying that to the sustainable development agenda. You don't have to focus on all 169 targets, but just bringing what you think is most important in your life and what you're able to speak to, that really creates this mosaic of advocacy for human rights. So you don't have to do everything, but we all have to do something.
Wonderful. Pick your thing. So that's the first piece of advice. What's your thing? Pick it and go for it. Other advice from our panelists?
I think just piggybacking to what you said, Ari, it's important, I believe, to share our stories, and that there is power in our stories, right? When we feel like I'm not being represented, or I know that others could be struggling with something that I've struggled and that I have to overcome. That's where I believe that we can begin to do the work of like, okay, I know that I can help. Maybe it's just sharing my story. Maybe it's just something that I have to overcome, and really believing that for ourselves. I think there's, again, so much power in our story. Something that I learned so much when I just recently moved to Texas, back to the mainland. That's why it's a little dark here. But something that I loved, that I learned there is the love for storytelling, right? The love for sharing story. And that's something that we can share amongst each other. It's like, rather than let our stories define us or disempower us, let's rewrite our stories. Let's let it empower us, and then in return, let it empower other people as well.
Excellent. So that's the second piece. We have find your thing, what is it, and go after it. The second one is share your story and find your people to share it with, knowing that what you have to share could definitely impact someone else's life. Other advice?
I would add to pick your thing. The second thing I would add to that is then go local. I'm a huge advocate of both, obviously being in your community and going out in the community, but also at the legislative level. Google, find out when the legislative session is in Hawaii, look up what's on the agenda, and literally you can go, you don't even have to go to the Capitol and testify. You can get on Zoom like we are right now, do your 2-minute speech for whatever the bill is, whatever is being heard, and make sure your voice is heard. And you have, trust me, I've gone in, done 2-minute speech. Your voice has so much power. You can really move the needle with our local elected officials, and chat with them after even. They work for us, so don't forget that.
Mahalo for that reminder. I mean, when you think about it, so many of these laws that we're looking at now with regard to inequality, removing certain content and curriculum from the schools, that's taking place on the continent, it's happening on the local level, right? It's folks who join a school board and then decide that they want to change some stuff. So maybe it's about time that we think about what we can do in terms of, joining our local school boards or doing something within our community. So mahalo for that reminder. Other advice, Carissa?
Yeah, I guess, I think we've heard such great, levels of what can we do. So I'm just going to very much, kind of tie it up with, don't forget your own self-care. Because I think, compassion fatigue is a very real experience. And I know with most of our passions and motivations, especially for those who are listening in, right? You're listening in because you care. It's not because you don't care enough, right? So there is a level, right, of just having your own self-awareness, creating your own space, your own intimate space, whether that is just with yourself, right, or with your partner. We do need to have a place where we can go back to. And just understanding your capacity and acceptance of, maybe I can't always be on the front line. Maybe I can't always do a march, depending on my capacities, right? But then just taking away from that of my acceptance piece of, just because I'm not participating, or maybe, I don't feel as effective on a larger scale, or maybe I'm not as connected to the community yet, right? Of just, that doesn't negate that you are not still living a empowered existence. So even making that conscious choice of, today I'm choosing certain things, whether it is being kinder to myself, whether it is just accepting that maybe this month I'm not going to be able to get to all of these community meetings. So I think that is so important, just so that the longevity and sustainability of every person who is in this field of care and compassion, or who is, socially justice minded, that this can be not a short-lived experience, but just something that we can sustain throughout our life, and even within our family, or passing on to our children.
Okay, so I need you to stop speaking directly to me because I don't know how many people are in this chat right now. Like, how did she know this is what I'm doing? But yeah, there's that. I think all of us maybe needed to hear that message because we all care so much about making a difference. So that idea that we need to stop for a moment, you cannot do everything. Maybe figure out what's the one little piece of that you can do. So maybe you can't go to the event, but you can make the flyer. Maybe you can't stay the whole time, but you can bake the cookies. So, there might be other ways for you to contribute. And that's a message that I'm taking home with me today as well. And then we do have a message, question in the chat. And so I think Alex wanted to ask that question on Gwen's behalf. Alex?
Thanks so much. And thank you, Gwen, for putting that question in the chat. Really appreciate that. So Gwen asks, though women around the world in so many countries still confront horrid inequality in the West, women's empowerment is growing. Stats in government participation, increasing in college degrees, etc. Whereas men's involvement in college and the ability to emotionally self-regulate is the lowest it may have ever been. This gender inequality of male personal and educational development is very scary. Many men are having existential crises as women become even more empowered. What are your ideas on how to address the paradox between this change between genders? This is a very interesting question. So yeah, whoever wants to jump in. Thank you so much, Gwen, for that.
Well, I can just quickly just chime in. Um, and it has been pretty evident just in therapy and who seeks out therapy, right, for self-growth, wellness, right? Historically, it has been women, it has been children. It's, typically we don't see men in the therapy room. So definitely, I can definitely understand that this paradox is kind of putting men, in almost questioning, what is my role and how do I exist in a new paradigm? Right, of equality and empowerment. So I think for men, if you have a woman that you respect, whether it's a sister, your mother, just that figure that you feel safe with to confide and just ask these questions of, I don't really quite understand, how do I navigate my relationships, my work, or just exist in society that now is changing? How can I move forward with it? And I think it's always going to be that kind of intimate breakthrough initial conversations that for hopefully men, right, it's uplifting them through our experiences as women, or other marginalized others, right? That we can kind of hopefully, maybe we can't walk that path for them, but we can at least help them and give them some guiding tips. And I know the therapy room has historically, again, been a very feminine women's space. But the therapy room, or whether it's a conscious raising group or group work support, it is there. And I think for most of us here, we would say we would love to have men join us, add their voice to our conversations.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And as we come to the last, few minutes together, just again want to mahalo all of you for attending. As I was preparing to help Alex moderate this discussion with our wonderful panelists and doing the research, one of the things I found on the UN's website was the following. They state that peace and global goals are never far from our daily life. Everyone can take action to participate in this day, the International Day of Peace. Actually, when I was looking this up, they're doing this back in my hometown, Philly. They're calling it Philly's Day of Peace, which we definitely need. And so everyone can do this and contribute to the sustainable development goals. And so just you being here today, over and over again, I saw in the research, this opportunity to connect, intergroup connection, cross-cultural connection across faiths, those kinds of discussion further these goals. So you're probably accomplishing a lot of this on a daily basis and not even realizing it. So I'm going to put in the chat a way that you can actually document, if you want to, what you're doing. There's an Act Now app that the UN has, where you can actually say, you know, today I had a conversation with a group of Buddhists, and I'm Christian, and this is what we talked about, to kind of show how we're meeting these goals on an individual basis. So just you being here today is a recommended action on the UN's website towards these goals, and educating yourself so that we can all note how we're contributing individually and collectively. So as we close, the wonderful Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "Do your little bit of good where you are." It is those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Do the little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits, the little things every day that will overwhelm the world. So mahalo today for your time and attention. I'll let Alex give his final remarks.
Thank you so much, Sarita. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here today. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Do what you can, right? Do the little bit that you can, and it's not a little bit. It's as we said in the beginning, it can really be the catalyst for a lot of change. I think that I think that especially folks like all of us here today speaking who are impassionate about these subjects, are very passionate about these subjects, and are just impassioned on a regular basis to include these conversations, you know, in our everyday lives. I think we take for granted the fact that we're like this, because a lot of times people do kind of search, oh, what can I do to give back, or how can I be a part of the community? And just asking that question or wanting that alone shows just how much of a change you actually can make just by wanting to, because there's so many folks around us who don't even take that first step. So really kind of looking within our own communities, it's so important. So I really appreciate it from each and every one of you, and I hope that people who were watching today felt inspired. And you know, I must say, it seems like since Abby has mentioned she has left to the mainland, it seems like now someone needs to open a women's empowerment group in Honolulu. There's an empty market for it that did exist. So anybody listening, that's hey, if you're looking for the next step, maybe this was your sign, right? But really appreciate it. And again, this this webinar was brought to you by Love Pono, Leeward Community College's Violence Prevention and Sexual Assault Awareness Program. You can follow us on all social medias at Love Pono. We also have YouTube. This webinar the recording will be uploaded, and our social medias will be the first platform to access that recording. So really appreciate it. Again, if there's any more questions, drop them in the chat, or feel free to stay behind and ask them. So really appreciate it from everybody today. Happy International Day of Peace. Thank you for talking about gender equality and women's empowerment with us here at Leeward Community College. And I hope you have a great day.
Ahui ho. Mahalo, folks.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, we'll stick around if anybody has any questions. Yeah, we really do need to have a women's empowerment group in Honolulu now that you're gone, Abby.
I know. Yes. So I will still be holding events. So
Oh, that's great.
some of the events that half of the events that we held were virtual. So we're both virtual and in person. So there's still that. So I have encouraged the women who do come to the virtual events to reach out to each other, to be proactive. And it's like, hey, I really, liked vibed with you, liked what you said, let's connect. And I think that's something that I really said to them. It's like, it's one thing for you to want connection, it's another thing to be proactive and to go out and look for it. No one's going to be really knocking at your door wanting to be your friend. It really does take that effort and that energy, and that any relationship does that. So we're still doing virtual.
Nice.
virtual events. So yeah, it's still up and running, and I will visit as well. So maybe once I visit, I'll host something in person
Yeah.
that you all know as well.
Do you have the link or additional information for those who are still
Yes,
on for how they
yes,
can
yeah.
reach out?
So
And can you put it in the chat?
yeah, so it is through Meetup. I
Oh,
have
Perfect.
moved it over to Facebook as well, so that community will continue to grow, and that is my plan as well. So I'm in Austin, Texas right now, so that's the plan as well here, is to continue to grow this like community of women, of just connection in general. That's something that I really did see when I started this group. It's just that hunger of wanting true connection, not just the superficial stuff, not just like the social media stuff, but like really wanting to talk to someone and feel seen and feel heard. So yeah, that's my goal, to spread that love. So it is Honolulu Women's.
That's so important. Yeah, and then with all the guests here, we've put in your social media, in our social media, quite a bit too. So hopefully they'll keep up with each and every one of you and all the great things that everyone's a part of. That's definitely the goal, to sort of have everyone see you folks as inspiration and network. So meet up Honolulu. Okay, perfect. If you folks have a second, we did have one question. Does anyone know of any women's organizations or groups in Hawaii working on policy change?
So there are a number of, obviously a lot of times it depends on the topic itself. But like off the top of my head, there's an organization called Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So obviously you can gather what they're working on. Going Home Hawaii, which I already mentioned, does work on policy change as well. There's the Legal Clinic, Women in Need, which works on transitional housing for women. So these are all kind of organizations that do work on the policy level. It just depends on the subject.
Great info. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And yeah, really appreciate you all. We'll end today's session and we'll all stay in touch. And I'll send you folks the recording when we have it uploaded. I'm not sure if we're gonna put it on YouTube or like maybe our website platform. Not quite sure yet, but it'll be uploaded in some capacity. So really appreciate each and every one of you.